Welcome to the Miscarriage Rebellion. I'm Sam Payne, CEO and co-founder of the Pink Elephant Support Network.
And I'm Stacey June Lewis, counsellor, psychotherapist and broadcaster. This podcast is where we share stories of many Australians who have lost their babies to early pregnancy loss.
With evidence and empathy, we unpack the shame, blame and stigma and the lack of support that many face. This is a loss that has been silenced for too long. We deserve better.
We are here to normalise the conversation.
And we're here to make lasting change. Welcome to today's episode, where we are joined by the phenomenal women, Jade and Rachael. Jade and Rachael are incredible advocates in this space. They continue to show up and share their experiences of pregnancy loss and much, much more via their social channels. They raise awareness, they foster more empathy, and they challenge the false narratives that exist around pregnancy loss. But we've brought them here today because what they exemplify is how friendships can change during these experiences. And whilst we know firsthand how we can lose friendships and that can be incredibly difficult and isolating, what's really beautiful here is how these two women have connected and how a shared mutual experience of pregnancy loss can be something that has brought them together to foster a meaningful bond and to be incredible, beautiful friends for each other. I'm really, really grateful to have Jade and Rachael here today, acknowledging that this is an incredibly hard interview. There are a lot of parts of this that are challenging to hear, but we need to hear them. We need to not shy away from these experiences because they are real and these experiences deserve to be heard. But acknowledging that if today's not the day for you, then maybe you save this one for a later time. Acknowledging that we also put a link to support at the end of all of our episodes. And ultimately, we're here to shine a spotlight on them so that we can foster more empathy and understanding to the experiences that these women go through, because they are very real and they deserve to be told. And I'm incredibly, incredibly grateful that they chose to share their stories with us. So without further ado, let's jump in to Jade and Rachael's story. Jade, I have followed your story on socials for a long time now, and a lot has happened. You are an incredibly generous voice in this space. The way that you articulate with words and what you say about your experience to hopefully change it for others should be commended. You're incredible. And I am so grateful we've got you here today. For the listeners of the Miscarriage Rebellion, if you could take some time to, as best as you can, we know it's hard, but to summarize, if you like, to share your experience of the different types of pregnancy loss and your experiences that you've been through, that would be amazing. Thank you.
My gosh, Sam, that was a real intro. Thank you. You're going to make me cry. Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong when you say it's been a long time. It certainly feels like it's been a really long journey to where we are finally. So my conception journey started in 2020, where we decided we wanted to start trying to conceive. Yep. We'll know that feels like a very long time, month after month, getting a period, that negative test, starting to spiral and think, will this ever happen for me? And so when I finally got that positive test, it was a very, very faint line. And so I was having to squint and use, the pregnancy check app on the phone, but it was a positive test. However, even though I'd sort of, been wanting this for so long, something felt really intuitively not right. Like I wasn't able to rejoice in the excitement. I felt scared telling people and I didn't know why. I was sort of like, something's not right here. And it turns out a week later, so only really having known I was pregnant for a week, I was on a work course online and it wasn't bright red blood. It was, this sort of dark brownish blood, which can be a sign of something called an ectopic pregnancy for those that aren't aware of what that is. It's when the egg has attached to your tube or somewhere elsewhere than the uterus where it shouldn't really be. It's implanted in a place where it can't grow and they're never viable. So I rang my GP and she didn't want to alarm me on the phone, but she really pushed for me to go and get a scan as quickly as possible. So the next morning she was able to get me in privately somewhere and they did the ultrasound and they saw the embryo in my left fallopian tube. and pulled me into a meeting room with my partner. And the doctor got on the phone and she said, honey, I'm really sorry, but you need to go straight to emergency. You can't even go, but you never really lose that moment where the world, the floor just parts ways beneath you, And strangely enough, I'd had someone tell me about their own ectopic pregnancy a few weeks before. And I remember physically being really moved. I never want to go through that. So I'd actually looked it up and done research on it. Like there's all this weird synchronicity sometimes in pregnancy loss. So because I know a lot of people that have had ectopics, they've never heard of them. So the whole process is very overwhelming in terms of the information and the decisions that you have to make on the spot, whereas I felt quite prepared. I'd read all about it. So we went to emergency. I was taken straight in. And I just remember laying on the bed there, just tears streaming down my face as this poor nurse is trying to take bloods and was unsuccessful 5 times and just felt terrible. The whole thing's a bit of a disaster. And it took us that long to fall pregnant. And the first thing you ask is why? Why me? Like, why is this happening to me? So with an ectopic, they had recommended that I have the surgery to remove the pregnancy. And while waiting to go into that surgery overnight, my fallopian tube burst because as the embryo starts to grow, it's not big enough to sustain the growth. And so the internal bleeding started happening. I was in incredible pain, rushed down to have the surgery and left that surgery with 1 tube left at, I think I was 37 at the time. So my age was something that was really playing on my mind. And I was like, wow, okay, great. I've got another thing against me now. In the surgery, they checked my right tube. So they flushed it with the dart and the doctor said, you did before. It's definitely reduced, but not by half. But you don't really listen to that. You think, oh, this is going to be even harder now. So you go home and, you're in a lot of pain. It's major surgery. So you're dealing with the physical recovery and trying to process what the hell has just happened. And that at the time, felt like the hardest and worst thing that had ever happened to me. And I was fortunate in that people did really show up. Like a lot of flowers were sent to the house. My parents came over straight away with food and were just devastated for us. But when I think back, I guess in terms of the larger spectrum of community and whatnot, it was forgotten quite quickly. Whereas, of course, about, like mindset in pregnancy and tried all these things because I was really struggling, seeing babies, seeing pregnancies, thinking this is never going to happen for me. I'm too old and now I've got 1 tube. But lo and behold, we actually fell pregnant 4 months later in November of 2020. And pregnancy after loss, it's a whole other episode. I think it's just horrendous. Yeah. So we went for a very quick early scan to make sure it was in the uterus. It was tick. Felt like I could relax a little bit, but over Christmas when we started to tell family, I'm in every toilet trip. I'm sure this is the same for anyone that has had that experience of seeing blood. I would just tremble and avoid the bathroom as much as possible, but then go in like 100 times to also check. I started to relax after our 13-week scan. We had that early anatomy scan and everything was looking really good. And I was sort of in that mindset at the time that once you pass the 12 weeks, like you're safe, that thing that society sort of talks about, like the risk of miscarriage has obviously reduced greatly. And I didn't know there was a world beyond that of loss at the time. So I started to relax and really enjoy it. We did our gender reveal, found out we were having a little girl. And then at my 19-week morphology scan, I didn't even take my partner. That's how comfortable I was that everything's okay. And we were in that scan. It was taking a really long time, which I'm normally quite a clued on person, but I just didn't feel I was sending, text to everyone, oh, she's being very cheeky, we can't see the brain, I've got to go back. And so I went back and then she was able to see it more clearly. And then she said, I'll be back. And then 2 people walked into the room and that's when it clicked. And I think I've heard that's quite similar for a lot of people. And when they sit down on the bed next to you and put the hand on your leg. And that whole pregnancy as well, intuitively, I felt like this is too good to be true. And I had been Googling genetic conditions or serious disorders in babies because I'd found out about genetic carrier screening after we fell pregnant with her. And I started freaking out that we hadn't done it. Things you just can't explain. And she sat down next to me and said, "Sweetheart, I'm really sorry, but there's something wrong with your baby's brain. We don't know what it means. We're not experts before Good Friday." So everything was closing down the next day, hospitals included in terms of the maternal fetal medicine department. They said someone will call you next Tuesday to give you more information and book in with the hospital. Now, when you opened, Sam, you said, I'm quite open and I speak openly. I'm a confrontational person. Like I don't have any issues in sort of speaking up. And I said, I'm not leaving here until you give me more information. That's not good enough. You can't do that to me. So they said, we'll try and get our doctor in-house to call you. So I sat in their waiting room with a cup of tea, like an hour until she called. And that's when she started talking about potential genetic disorders and what they could mean. And this was just a whole world that I had never heard of that was just so confusing to me at the time. So, I mean, I'll speed up a little bit because it's a very long story. Weeks, we're talking appointments at maternal fetal medicine, amniocentesis, had to wait for an MRI. Now, fetal MRIs are useless before 24 weeks of the brain. So we had to wait till 24 weeks. I was only 19 when we first got the news.
5 weeks of this.
And then we had to wait a week for the actual results. Yeah. I don't know how we survived that. Like I was developing panic attacks, severe panic attacks. I couldn't sleep. It's a lot, especially when you're still pregnant and you're growing a baby, and that's taking a lot out of you at the same time.
Were you offered any mental health support? Were you offered any support from that side of things, or was it all medical management?
The hospital, which I'm now an ambassador for, as you know,
you can say the hospital, it's absolutely fine.
They were amazing. The Royal Hospital workers. One of them called me in between all those appointments just to check in and see how I was feeling and offered me support there. I sought out my own private therapist as well because I knew that this was just so much bigger than anything I'd gone through and would need that professional support. So, I was fortunate in that sense, but I do know how lucky I am because I know that a lot of families do not get that same care in a hospital setting, sadly, and are not offered that support. So 8 weeks later, got called back to the hospital. The MRI results are in now. We had been told in the initial ultrasound, because the equipment and technology at the hospital is obviously exceptional and can see a lot more than your private ultrasound places. And they said, look, it could be a really big cyst in the brain that will shrink and disappear, or it could be a disorder that these were the things we're looking at, the part of the brain that she had that was abnormal, affects motor function. So everything to do with speech, eating, swallowing, walking, moving. So we walked into the room, we'd had an amnio and that came back clear. So we didn't think it was anything sort of genetic at that point. But the genetic doctor was in the room and he was the first one I noticed. And I thought, what are you doing in here? We've cleared everything with you. And there was about 6 people in the room. And I just sat down and I just went, no, it's not good. All my prayers and hopes and wishing, it hasn't worked. And Antonia Shand, the doctor, the head of maternal fetal medicine, sat there and said, we've got the MRI results back and it's actually revealed something more serious than we could actually detect on the ultrasound. It's the one thing I like to keep sort of private because it is a spectrum. But I just don't need people, Googling and sharing their opinion on what they think I've done when I know exactly how serious it was for her. And I looked at the genetic doctor and I said, that's really bad, isn't it? Because I'd been down a Google rabbit hole for 8 weeks. There probably wasn't a single thing I hadn't read about or looked into. So I had heard of this. It's very rare. And he just nodded his head and he had like a real sorrow in his eyes looking at me like I'm really sorry. And, Craig and I, my partner, we'd had to have discussions already by this point of what would we do if we found out she was really unwell, and the genetic disorder that she had is really horrible in terms of quality of life. It's not a life. It's organ failure, blindness, inability to eat or breathe independently, no communication, so never talking or walking, and can be fatal by 7 years old. Like, that's the average age that the fatality rate someone with that genetic disorder lives. And you're forced to question the difference between life and living. Like, yes. Why do we enjoy life? What is living? I would not want to be born into that life. I couldn't possibly do that to my own child that I loved and wanted so dearly. And so we made the very, very, very difficult, heartbreaking decision to say goodbye before she was ever brought into the world, into a life like that would have just seen her in hospital. A vegetable was the word that was used. Yeah, and so it's so surreal to me now. I say to Rach all the time, did that happen to me? Like, I think you push it somewhere in your brain. It's a place you just don't have to go all the time, and you only go there sometimes, but it sort of feels like someone else's story. You're telling it most of the time. I think that's how you survive. But yeah, you basically book an appointment to come in and give birth to your baby and say goodbye forever. And that has now been the biggest thing that has ever happened to me. So in terms of my experience, the topic was really, really horrible and my grief was enormous, but the longevity of the experience of Harper's diagnosis and saying goodbye, and now, having held her and never getting to hold or see her again, there's not an inch of your life that a loss like that doesn't impact. So, relationships suffered, my whole world changed. I went on to have another very early pregnancy loss at Christmas. So she was born in May of 2021, fell pregnant again in December, and I thought, this might be a nice Christmas gift for us, and then had a chemical pregnancy Christmas week. So I can't even tell you what it's like having to go into Christmas without your baby for the first time, already that, and then having another pregnancy loss Christmas week. At this point, I was just like, the universe hates me. Like, what have I done to have to deal with all of this? And I don't know where you find that internal drive or hope to keep going. Like, a lot of people ask me, how do you keep going? How do you get past the fear of it happening again? And it's really just sitting with yourself and saying, okay, is my desire to have a living baby bigger than my fear? If it is, then you have no choice. You have to keep going. So we did, and we now have River, our living Earthside baby. But I am not the person I was before this journey, that's for sure. And the people in my life, some have stayed absolutely and been incredible, but a lot of them are new as a result of this journey. And it's something I really struggle with internally, because I've been so enriched with beautiful love and friendships and support as a result of Harper leaving us. But I wouldn't want to give those friendships up now. Like, it's really hard to get my head around. Like, it's like I don't want her to be the sacrificial lamb that gave me all these incredible things, but I also couldn't live without these women in my life as well. So yeah, that's a whole other.
Jade, I'm just so sorry. I'm so sorry for your losses. Congratulations on River and the other babies, because they still were our babies when they arrived, right? Sometimes we don't actually have the acknowledgement because we're dealing with so much of the loss before we even got a chance to be congratulated for their arrival in our tummies. I want to talk to you before we get to Rachel's story, who's very patiently waiting and obviously very emotional, and you could just feel her with you through that whole story. I want to talk a little more about those specific life impacts. You know, you have a job, you had a life, you had things moving through that I'm sure you thought would be a part of those babies' journeys, and then this journey takes a turn and it all changes. I want to hear a little more about, you know, the friendships or the relationships that did start to change, maybe even work or what it looked like for you and what that was like for you.
Thank you. I think I've been really lucky in that, you know, the majority of people have really shown up for me through those losses and continue to do so, because we talk a lot about compassion fatigue, and that can be really easy to feel with someone that's gone through pregnancy and baby loss. Like, you just get tired of supporting that person because it's never ending. But that's the point, isn't it? It's never ending. We live it every day. But there were people, you know, that I thought would show up for me, and I literally got one text message after Harper was born, and then like silence for a year even. And then they sort of tried to creep back into my life and let's catch up, and no way. Sorry. I'm quite brutal like that. Like, Rach and I are very similar in that sense, in that we have really high expectations of people, but it's because we feel that we give a lot as well. And there's some things that at this point are just unforgivable in terms of not being there in a really present way after what we went through. So yeah, some friendships definitely unraveled, and there was never really a full-blown argument about it as such. Or I just stopped giving it any energy or time. When they reached out, I just didn't respond. Like, we have very limited energy.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Yeah.
Picky about where I put that energy. Work, like, I think the biggest thing for me and the best way to describe it is all of a sudden life became really terrifying. So something as simple as going up the road to get a coffee, I had to like mentally prepare and put my armor on for. And I don't think a lot of people realize this. Every day you are basically standing there waiting for the next punch from someone that doesn't mean it or know any better. But in those early weeks, I remember the first time someone asked me if I had children after Harper was born. I was standing at a cafe. There was about 20 people outside. It was we were in the thick of lockdown, so we went through our grief with Harper during the thick of COVID and lockdown. And we'd just gotten our puppy, Reef, to be our emotional support animal. And a woman was sort of doting over him and then said, "Oh, do you have children?" And I just wasn't prepared for that question. And I said no, because there was 20 people standing around and I wasn't ready for them to all hear, you know. And then she said, "Oh, lucky, because, you know, you wouldn't be able to have children on top of that puppy." And I just walked home and cried. I felt so guilty that I didn't acknowledge Harper to this person. And I felt so horrible that she said that to me, like, lucky that you don't have children. And I don't think there's a single day in where 2 years on now from her being born that I haven't copped like a sentence like that, or someone saying something that has hurt. But you have to build, I think, a lot of resilience and a really thick skin around it. So
you shouldn't have to, right?
I know, yeah, you're right. You shouldn't have to, but you do to survive. Yeah, if you want to be a functioning part of society again, that doesn't, you know, cry or break down at everything around you, seeing babies. I remember someone said, "Go for a walk, you'll feel better." And I went for a walk, and there was a mothers group with like 5 mothers, and they all had little girls. And I was like, "Go for a walk," they said. "You'll feel better." No, I didn't want to leave the house. After lockdown, we caught up with some people that we hadn't seen in a while, and this was maybe only a couple of months after she was born. And one of them said, "Oh, look how cute that baby is." And I just sat there and thought, oh my God, people really don't understand what I'm going through. That one of them pointed to a pregnant woman doing a photo shoot down by the beach and said, "Oh, look at that photo." Like, I don't want to look at pregnant women or babies. Like, in the world would I want to look at that right now?
Yeah.
And it was just this huge eye-opener to me that I literally lived on a different planet at this point. People.
It is. It feels so alienating. And that's that whole thing again that we talk about with Pink Elephants as well, the value of connecting with others who get it. Because whilst we've all got our own journeys and they're very different, but there is a sense of knowing and understanding that comes from people who've walked similar journeys of loss. Because
and I think that's why we all gravitate to each other. I only started to then feel safe being around who I call my people now. They're my people. They will never get tired of holding space for my griefy days. They know how hurtful it is to say something in the wrong way, or, they know what it means to send something meaningful on your child's birthday that you'll never see. All these things. You don't have to explain how it feels or explain why you're acting a certain way, or it's just this beautiful, enriching, it fills up your cup rather than depleting. And I isolate myself now from people or experiences that I know will deplete me. I just don't feel as safe in society.
And Jade, it sounds like, as you've called yourself, you can be quite a confrontational person. Like, you'll go in to bat. So when, I'm sure there is another side where you need to not be that, and that the assumption is what you are, not what you have to fight for per se. So because that energy is just, as you've mentioned, it's just a real sucker. Like, it real sucks you dry.
Rachael, before we jump into how you and Jade actually connected, because I'm sure people want to hear that story as well. You and I connected years ago as well, and I've also followed and witnessed a lot of your journey and the highs and the lows and how much you have been through. And just like Jade, how you take what's happened to you and you find a way to share it that can help others. And again, I just want to commend that, because it's not an easy thing to do, and you do it so publicly in a really beautiful way. Again, the way that you articulate a lot of this journey will make a massive difference to how other people respond to those going through similar journeys. But if you could take those listeners who perhaps aren't across your journey through what you've been through, that would be amazing.
Oh, thank you. I've started to actually find it a little bit difficult to say my journey, because it comes out just like almost like an unemotional story that I'm telling, because I've said it so many times and I've had so much loss. It's almost like it's become more statistics. So it started with trying to get pregnant on our honeymoon. My very type A personality, after 2 months of trying, I went to a fertility specialist and forced my husband, Johnny, to get his sperm tested. I had my AHM check.
I always get that one confused.
Right. I always say it like the
health insurance, because I have, and you use the health insurance a bit, so I really do relate.
I literally just purchased some for travel insurance last week, which is why I've got it wrong. We got all the checks, and we ended up actually doing, I like to always say this part because I think it's really important for people to know if they don't know about it. We actually got ovulation tracking, which you can get 3 months for free through Medicare. So that's really important. So it's cheaper than using those little smiley sticks. I'm pretty sure I have kept those companies in business. But yeah, it is a bit of an effort. You have to get blood tests regularly. But we found out that we were ovulating. Well, I was ovulating, but I'd like to not exclude my partner. But yeah, I was ovulating on day 8 instead of day 14. So crazy early. But with that information, we fell pregnant straight away. We were really excited, but it ended in a miscarriage. I had about 6 or 7 weeks, so relatively early, but enough obviously to cause lots of heartbreak. So I had a D&C, like Jade, that felt really important in my story back then. And that's not to disregard anyone who has gone through a miscarriage, but just in the grand scheme of what I then went through, it hurt, but we started trying again the very next month and got pregnant straight away with that beautiful ovulation tracking. And that pregnancy ended up being our daughter, Mackenzie. I'm sure everyone says this, but the most beautiful girl in the entire world in my eyes. She was perfect until very quickly she wasn't. At 10 weeks old, she was diagnosed with a terminal condition called spinal muscular atrophy, something we had never heard of before. And it turned out that both my husband and I carried it. And unknowingly we had caused this in her. A very serious condition that it works on your motor neurons and it stops the ability of a person being able to move their body. So it starts with not being able to move your arms and your legs. And then it starts working on the organs, not being able to swallow and not being able to breathe. And eventually they pass away. So we were told that we had a couple of months left with her. The average age of an SMA baby is 8 months old. So we threw ourselves into living the best life we possibly could with her. We travelled all around Australia, gave her as many experiences as possible. We walked in dinosaur prints. We took her on a helicopter, a hovercraft, every type of transport we could, aquariums, zoos. We celebrated month days every month, knowing she wouldn't make her first birthday. And we spent time with family. She passed away in our arms at Sydney Children's Hospital when she was 7 months and 11 days old. She caught the common cold and one of her lungs collapsed because she couldn't move the mucus that normally people move by coughing. She coughed. So she spent 5 days in hospital. Her lung actually ended up getting better, and we actually thought we were going to be able to take her home, but she'd had to have a feeding tube, and we think that caused an internal bleed. We tried giving her blood, but it wasn't clotting, and she just kept bleeding. So we had to make the decision to take her oxygen mask off. And she took 2 little breaths and then she was gone. We left the hospital without her and without a piece of us. We were gone forever. We found out about the genetic side of things. We found that really difficult because we were researching and realised that we could have just done a simple saliva swab to find out what we carried. And while we never would have taken a second that we had with Mackenzie away, those 5 days in hospital watching her, you wouldn't ask someone that you love to go through that just so you could be happy, just so you could have them here. So a large part of our story centered around genetics and making sure that someone didn't go through what we went through. And we started advocating and campaigning for change and wanting that genetic carrier screening so that that saliva swab to be available to everyone who was planning a pregnancy or an early pregnancy. We started doing that a month after Mackenzie was diagnosed. And yeah, we have a big research project called Mackenzie's Mission. It's a very long story on its own, but we've got the really good news is that in November, the top 3 genetic conditions will now be able to be screened for free on Medicare, which is amazing.
Wow.
And we're not done yet. We're trying very hard to create a national screening program that will screen for 1,000 genetic conditions. So I'm hoping before Mackenzie's 10th birthday, that will be in Australia. So we had found out because of the genetics that we had a 1 in 4 chance of any future babies having the same condition that Mackenzie had. So we started down the path of IVF actually before we lost her, in the hopes that we could have a sibling that she would meet. We knew that that was very unlikely, but we actually got the call a month after Mackenzie died to say that the genetic test required for IVF was ready. That was very hard to get that call, but also we didn't know how long to wait. We were getting older. And we very naively thought that IVF was going to be very easy for us because we have no fertility issues. We thought that we do a round of IVF, maybe get 15 embryos, have our babies, and then we donate the rest to other couples who needed them. That was our plan. And it really didn't go like that. I know, hearing Jade talk about Christmas, we went into that Christmas. Mackenzie passed away in October. We started the IVF process in November. And we found out, I think on Christmas Eve, maybe the day before that our first round of IVF caused us to have absolutely 0 embryos. So we went into Christmas without Mackenzie and our first round of IVF not giving us anything, not even one blastocyst to be tested. We did 5 rounds of IVF initially and got 1 healthy embryo, and that was it. I couldn't bring myself to transfer that embryo because I felt like we wanted to have 2 more children, and the idea of, I just knew that my age was a big factor in what was happening with IVF. So we actually had a break for a minute and we got pregnant naturally, thinking that that would be easier. We got pregnant very quickly and found out that, so with getting pregnant naturally, we had to wait and have a CVS at 12 weeks and 5 days. After a couple of weeks waiting, we found out that it was another little girl, and she also had SMA. We called her Bella, and we decided to medically terminate that pregnancy. We were, I guess, lucky in a way that we had found out before needing to birth her, because even though there's not a category of loss, there is in my mind a category of levels of trauma, and I didn't want to birth. They didn't want to birth her, so we had a surgical termination, and then went back into IVF. We did another 3 rounds, and then I got deep vein thrombosis from one of my rounds of IVF, and that got cancelled. And then we did another round of IVF. I think we're up to 8 or 9 by this stage, and we finally got enough embryos. I think we had 3. We transferred 1, it failed, and the devastation when it took us so long to get those embryos. We transferred another and it failed. And we wanted to know why we had these genetically healthy embryos and they were failing. So I had a laparoscopy and we found out that I now had stage 4 endo. We removed that and we put our final embryo in, and it took, but because we were so nervous and we knew too much, even though it was a genetically healthy embryo, we did genetic testing. We did another CVS and a NIPT. Well, we did a NIPT and it came back with an abnormality. And then we did a CVS and it turned out that there is 5% inaccuracy in IVF genetic testing, and we had fallen into that 5%. So we had a little boy who we called Leo, who actually didn't have SMA, but had a severe chromosome condition. I don't share the chromosome condition because I don't need people's opinions on whether we made the right or wrong decision. But we terminated that pregnancy, that little boy, Leo. By this stage, we decided to do one more round of IVF and then we were going to go back to trying naturally. And we got an embryo that turned out to be our little baby, Zach, who's now 2.5 years old. I should also say amongst that, we also had 7 other miscarriages or early miscarriages, chemical pregnancies. So yeah, that was another layer. When Zach was 10 months old, we wanted to try again because we knew how long it had taken us to get pregnant. So we went back to IVF, and that was painful in its own way because I had to wean Zach before I wanted to, because I needed my hormone levels to be low enough to be able to do IVF. And that was another layer of grief, another was taken away. So we started IVF, but I think just before we started, Johnny and I thought, we don't have the money for this. Maybe we'll try naturally. So we had sex once and then we freaked out about our decision and we went, no, we've got to go through IVF. We can't do that again. Did pregnancy tests, wasn't pregnant, started IVF, and then a week into IVF found out we were actually pregnant. And that baby, after waiting the 13 weeks to be tested, we found out, and then the 2 weeks waiting for the test results, we found out that this little Bubba was another boy and was healthy. And I don't know how miraculous that was, but yeah, so I don't really know the answer of how many children I have, but I've birthed 3 babies, Mackenzie, Isaac, and little Joshua, who's now 8 months old.
There is so much, experiences. I'm so sorry for everything that you've been through. It's one of those where I don't even know which parts to start to kind of look at. And I resonated with what you started, that whole, when you've shared your story so much, it can feel almost mechanical and statistical, because you give so much by sharing your story, but that also takes its toll on you. And I want to add a layer here of that fact of, yes, we want to inspire people to share their stories, but Stacey and I have talked about this with some other guests as well. There are boundaries around that. You two have beautiful boundaries about what parts of your story you share and what parts you don't want to open up. That's okay. There's other things to consider as well about where you share your story and who with and for what purpose and for when you're ready. So again, thank you for the whole that you do in sharing. And I see how hard it can be to do that. I also want to unpack something that I think will be really interesting to the listeners. we will move into how you two met, but I'm fascinated by this as well, is that you went really quickly into IVF, and I understand there was that biological clock ticking, and that makes that part of that decision as well for many women and partners. But you did go in with that narrative of IVF will be easy. What part do you think needs to change in society so that because I feel like, I'm trying to get my words around this, but I feel like a lot of people think that IVF is a tick box, that you go in, you have IVF and you'll have a baby in 9 months. What can we do to kind of challenge and change that?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. For starters, I wish that people had or someone had told me that usually the first round of IVF is where they're trying to figure out a baseline. It's not very common for your first round. I remember telling our friend Kira that, and I really felt like a Debbie Downer. Like I really felt like I was sort of taking the shine off of something that was going to potentially give her children. But I just wish someone had told me that. I also wish that people knew that IVF isn't just for people who have fertility issues, because there's the genetic reasons, there's illnesses like cancer, like there's a whole lot of reasons that IVF occurs. I just think that there needs to be more conversations around how many rounds of IVF it takes, how much money you need to have, the fact that freezing eggs and freezing embryos doesn't mean a baby. There's so many elements around it that I think that we should have more conversations about. IVF is incredible, but it's not a given.
It's one option, yeah. Rachael, I'm sorry, and I really just acknowledge everything that you've said and gone through, and I'm also super grateful for you sharing all of it with us, but in general. I talk a lot about, and I think particularly through fertility challenges, pregnancy loss, there is this very unique understanding of holding two feelings simultaneously. I think a woman that goes through this knows it in a way that is so unique. And when you've explained your last pregnancy as miraculous, and then you also have to hold space for a pregnancy that was almost, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the opposite, this kind of devastation. I wanted to just ask you to speak to that a little, of how that is to live with. And if you could explain what that is like for you to really have to hold those two things at the same time, that one doesn't cancel out the other. You know, and someone thinks that you've had this miracle, but then it makes it the other part change or evolve, or even some would expect better. I wanted to see, what your take was on that and how you cope with that.
I feel like my body and my mind and my heart is permanently split. I'm in multiple places all at once, and it is really overwhelming. It's something that I'm working through or trying to work through. I was saying to Jade the other day, I have been pregnant, breastfeeding, having surgeries, injections, everything every month for 7 years now. And I'm finally here with my babies in my arms. And I feel like the last 7 years is starting to creep out from behind the door that I've shut it all through, because I was in fight or flight and the adrenaline is starting to wear off. And I'm so torn at the moment and overwhelmed in every aspect, because I am so aware of how lucky I am having my beautiful boys. But it also means that I feel like I can't feel any other emotion other than grateful, because for a while there, I didn't even think that I was going to get them. And so every single time something's hard, I almost dismiss it and feel like I can't say it because I'm lucky to have them. I know that there are people in my Instagram following who haven't been able to have kids yet. And I feel really disgusted in myself when I am having a moment where I'm overwhelmed because I feel like I should know better. I also find it hard sometimes when I feel so much intense joy because I feel like I am cheating on the part of my heart that's with Mackenzie. So how can I smile when she's not here? But then the other part, then I talk to myself, I can hear myself say, but she wants you to be happy. And I feel like I'm a ping pong ball just being battered across a table back and forth and back and forth. And my mind is, the effect of the last 7 years is that my mind is now so scattered and full and overwhelmed. And I've never felt more that feeling that you can feel two things at once, because I'm both living the life that I dreamt of and struggling.
Yeah. Want to acknowledge that. And I think that that's something, another narrative that plays out for many, many women is that when we talked about pregnancy after loss anxiety, Jen, and how difficult that is. And it's hard because you've got to lean into any of the joy can be really difficult at that point. And then you hopefully finally end up with a baby in your arms. And I know myself personally, I've struggled with things like, and you shared as well, you said, but sleep with a baby. And then I've put up with so much more because I was so grateful and I was meant to just be this loving, nurturing mother because I'd finally got this baby that I have dreamt about and wanted for so long. But yet then you're struggling with other things and it's really hard to articulate outwardly and not feel like you're not then portraying this immense gratitude that you do have. And those two things are so difficult. And I think what I hear there and what needs to be acknowledged is how profound and lasting these experiences, if not trivializing it with the word experience or journeys or anything like that, but how much this all stays with us for such a long time. And I think that plays into as well what we want to unpack now is your two, and the others as well, but your beautiful friendship and how that come about and how you guys, you see that, but you don't need to always say it, right? And I think there's something beautiful. So if we can kind of move to, how you met and how you kind of hold space for each other and how special that is, I'd love to hear more about that.
Do you remember, Rach? Do you want me to take this?
All right, can you go?
So the hospital had told us about potential genetic conditions and genetic carrier testing through Mackenzie's mission, which was obviously a result of Rach and Johnny's incredible work after Mackenzie's loss. And I went online because I didn't know anyone in my life at the time going through anything like this. And I found Rach on Instagram, and like many others, I messaged her and I couldn't believe when she took the time to respond. And the time with which I messaged her was kind of when we were in that waiting period between receiving the final MRI results and making the decision. And from memory, Rach was just really helpful in offering. I obviously then shared with her the results that we did receive and that we would be medically terminating Harper's pregnancy as well. And I feel like looking back now, I mean, Rach can talk to why she actually met me and had me back, but so much synchronicity in our friendship happened at the start and has evolved. And I'm just a firm believer that your whole life and journey is already written. Like you're just here basically as the puppet living it out. And I really believe, people that you come into contact with and friends, etc., you're always destined for whatever purpose to connect. And I feel that very strongly with Rach because there was a huge moment during my labour with Harper where the maternal fetal medicine department at the Royal Hospital for Women have a bit of a tradition that a bottle of champagne or wine that was gifted from a previous family that experienced loss but went on to have hope or have their rainbow babies. So it was sort of this cycle of passing on a glimmer of hope through a bottle of something. And I was laying in bed, because you obviously need to be induced to give birth to a baby preterm. And one of the midwives from the maternal fetal medicine came in and sat next to me, and she said, "Now, I hope you don't find this strange, but we have a bit of a tradition." And she pulled out this red box, this champagne box, and she said, "A family have brought this in that have also had a loss. We'd like to give it to you in the hope that it gives you hope that one day you'll bring one in." For had finally made that trip into the hospital to give her own bottle to be passed on, which she received during her losses. And I'm laying there sort of in labour, and I sent her a photo of the box, and I remember we were just like, "Oh my God, like, you got my champagne, like, I can't believe it." So that was sort of really special. I felt like she was really there with me, and I now look back and I'm like, Rachael is one of Harper's many special gifts to me, and that was just the start of that. And I remember, I think it was probably about a week after she was born, Rach and I lived quite close to each other at the time, and Rach said, "Do you want to come over? We'll have coffee." And I mean, I don't know how many people Rach did that with at the time. I don't think she had time. She just had Zach to be going for coffee with everyone that wrote to her on Instagram. But I'm so grateful that, you know, she took that in how we view friendships, boundaries, work, family. I like to say I think we're quite headstrong women that give our everything to people that we love, but also will not tolerate crap. And yeah, what's evolved from there are just more synchronicities. So when Rach shared that she fell pregnant with Joshy, naturally her little miracle, who she had to wait to have testing done to see if he was healthy, I fell pregnant just weeks before her with River. And unfortunately for us with Harper, they weren't able to identify the genetic cause of her disorder. So we couldn't do IVF or any of the testing that Rach has shared to see if it had developed normally or if it looked like Harper's and the same thing had happened again. And so Rach and I pretty much spent the first 3 months of our pregnancies waiting in this horrendous anxiety to find out if we could keep them or if they would be healthy. And I don't know anyone that has kind of navigated that at exactly the same time. Like, what are the chances we both have these genetically complex conception journeys, fell pregnant naturally at the same time, and held each other through that, I think, in ways that no one else could really do or understand unless you were going through it. And so now we have our babies that are just a few weeks apart that both turned out to be untouched by these genetic disorders and healthy, and seeing them play together is just so surreal for us. So yeah, it's been really, really special. And I think for me, what's really special about our friendship is there's no competing around who's had a worse journey or whose pain is greater, whose grief is stronger. Like that, there's no room for that in genuine compassion and empathy. And while we've got similarities in our journey in that, you know, we're the only ones in our group that ever know what it's like to have to leave a hospital without your baby. That's something we still can't put words to. And that's a similarity, but there's differences. You know, I had to birth Harper, which, as Rach has said, something that she really never wanted to have to do with her terminate empathy and emotion for what she went through with Mackenzie that I couldn't feel before River. And I've told Rach sometimes I just go to bed and I cry thinking about what she went through. And I think it's just that heartfelt, like, support and love that we show each other. Yeah, it's never a competition. It's how can I show up for you today and are you okay? years on, and I'll never get tired of it.
My God.
Yeah.
How can I show up for you today?
Yeah.
I think that is such a beautiful. Well, I've followed for a while, and I've loved watching your friendship and how you do show up for each other. And I'm sure I only see a tiny part of it on socials. I don't see the full of what you all have for each other. But I think that's such a beautiful question that everyone can ask themselves. If you're listening and you have friends, loved ones going through this experience, how can I show up for them today? I just think that's just something, it's absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Especially if you don't know, because sometimes you don't know. And, people don't know how to support others through loss, so ask.
Sometimes when you're going through the loss, you don't know either. Everyone's like, what can I do? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I need. I don't know what my name is today. Rachael, did you want to add anything to that?
It's when I first lost Mackenzie, I could only see darkness. I couldn't see. I was so angry. And that anger and sadness just seeped into every part of me. I questioned everything about life, religion, spirituality, everything. And it's only sort of as things progressed was I able to see the abundance of gifts that Mackenzie actually gave me. And I'm actually preparing tomorrow. I'm recording some videos for palliative care. And one of the things that I'm sort of saying to these parents is, you will find gifts, but it's so hard to hear it in the moment. And my world is completely different because of Mackenzie in every way. Who I am, how I deal with people, how much I give, how much I won't put up with, but also the people in my life. I lost relationships, really significant relationships. But what I've gained in this group of girls is, like Jade said, it's so hard to comprehend that you're so thankful for something that you had that was caused because of the loss of your child. But there's some incredible people in my life that stood by us, but they have never really been able to give or understand the way that people like Jade can.
100%. I'm still blown away by all of this. It takes a lot to listen and to hold space as well, and to think about all of these different things and how they've impacted you. But I do hope that everyone is listening. There is an element of hope here, and there is that element of the reaching out to make new friends is okay. The power of peer support, the power of connecting with someone else with lived experience of this. And that is something that also Pink Elephants tries its hardest to provide. That's how it started. Gabby, for me, was what you two have. It was that someone who just got it, who had a completely different experience to me. And it was that we wanted to create and make sure that everyone has access to. But we're here today, and the Miscarriage Rebellion is around action specifically for pregnancy loss. We know that we've talked about this, that it's not moving quick enough, that women are still being dismissed by their experiences with comments like, at least it happened early, or at least you have a child, or a lot of those invalidating comments happen. And then that flows through into the experience being met with the lack of empathy and understanding that it really, truly deserves. You both spoke so beautifully about those first losses that you had as well at the beginnings of both of your journeys. But I want to kind of put it back to both of you now and go, if there is no magic wand, and we know we can't make the experience not happen to us, but if we could change one thing within the system, if there's some action that you would like to see that could make it easier for bereaved parents, then what would that be? What would you like to see happen? And I might go to Jade first, if that's right.
Honestly, mine's quite vague, but in a nutshell, if I had a magic wand and could change one thing, it would be that everyone had an abundance of support post-loss and we're not on the receiving end of really insensitive, horrible comments. It's that we treated grief like we do with parents that pass, grandparents, anyone else. We treat baby loss in the same way, that people will not have to suffer secondary losses in their life. When they're already in so much pain, secondary losses of relationships, friendships, social safety, or all of it. It's that we can wrap them in wool and love them and they don't get hurt more than they already are.
It's true. I don't think it's vague. I think it's really clear. And I think it's really, really necessary. Rachael?
I'm going to be greedy and I'm going to pick 2. And they're pretty big, but firstly, I would really love it if somewhere in our education system we were all taught grief, because we are all going to die. We are all going to have family members that die. And as a society, we are so absolutely terrified of loss and of death that we don't confront it until it actually impacts us. And we all feel so uncomfortable by grief and by loss that those comments of "at least," they're used not to make the person feel better, they're to make the person who's saying that statement feel better, because they're uncomfortable in the situation and they want to make themselves feel better that you will be fine. And so I wish that we had taught grief and loss in the education system and what to do, how you can help, because the people who hurt me the most were the ones who didn't want to hold space for me because it was uncomfortable for them. So they needed to walk away. And I felt like I had to spend my time where I should have only been having to think about my daughter and my family, having to grieve relationships that were around me because they hurt me and they had walked away. And I was so angry that was my attention was being split. So, and the second one would be what you guys are doing, but what I'm sure you hope for in the future is this centralized spot that when you lose a baby in whatever capacity, you have this one organization that gives you free counseling that the government provides. You're set up with the counselor. You don't have to try to find one like I had to try to find. When I had my daughter diagnosed, I had to find someone. I didn't know about mental health care plans. I didn't know the list of things that I could give to my family members or to my friends and say, these are the things that are going to help me over the next 6 months. Like food delivery, someone to come and do the wash, dry, fold, laundry services. Like there's a list of things that I wish that I had known, and I would love to see a one-stop shop basically for people when it comes to child loss, so they don't have to try to find it themselves. And I'd really love the government to be able to see how much of a priority that should be.
I couldn't agree more. As a CEO of an organisation that doesn't receive any ongoing government funds to provide the circle of support that holds space for thousands of bereaved parents each month and does not have enough capacity to provide counselling services to each and every one of those that wants it. So, for example, we'll run a bereavement support programme. We'll have 85 women put their hand up and say, I need this, I want this. And we can only put 12 through.
It's not good enough.
And it's not good enough. And we can't change this alone. We can't make this happen. And I get upset because it hurts, because I see us saying no to people who are brave enough to admit that they want support and help and need it. And we can't do this alone. And it needs to start with an understanding of the profound impact of these losses and the lack of support that there is. Like when I started Pink Elephants 8 years ago, there was nothing for specific to pregnancy loss that was early prior to 20 weeks. Again, I hate the word early as well. But there was nothing in that space. We were just starting to maybe share something on socials. So I feel like part of this as well, I completely agree, is this, let's raise the awareness, but let's raise the awareness so it's a call to action that's really clear, that we say, hey, government, you have a role to play in this too. You need to listen to us and you need to understand the depths of our experiences, our grief, everything that comes along with this. And you need to help us. You need to actually put more than 2 lines in a national women's health strategy on miscarriage, because it's not good enough.
I think knowing from everything with Mackenzie's mission, I think it's really important for the government to actually hear that it's not just sad women, sad parents in inverted commas, that there is actually a significant impact on Australia. And if they could actually see the long-term implications on them, on governments, on money, on workplaces, that it is actually more beneficial to put money towards this than to fix it once people are broken.
And it's that we know from research in the UK that if women are left unsupported after an ectopic pregnancy, any other type of pregnancy loss, there's clinical levels of anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and even suicidal thoughts that are still present 1 to 3 years later. We can do better. We can provide early intervention peer support. We can provide counselling services, therapy support programs. And when we do that, to your point, we can increase things like a women's workforce participation. We can make sure that a woman is ready to go back to work, and her partner too, and they've had the support and that wrapped in that love and cotton wool that you described, Jade. It matters. We know Professor Leslie Regan from the UK, who's highly respected Obengyn, like would be the equivalent of being on Ransgog here, shares her research around how TLC is the thing that makes the most difference. Tender, loving care is the thing that makes the most difference in a pregnancy after loss outcome. And that's someone who's got a really scientific mind who's saying this makes a difference. We need to wake up. We need to offer this to parents when they need it most. So yeah, I could go on, but I'm...
You're doing amazing work, Sam. But yeah, the fire in your voice is what's going to create change. And, you know, I think you're right. We're moving too slowly. We have a really long way to go. I think it's a vicious cycle in that we need more women to speak up about their experiences, but society doesn't hold a safe space yet to do that. So, you know, it's chicken or the egg first. Like, where do we start? And I always encourage people to share their experience if they feel comfortable, but I really absolutely understand that some women are just not in a place to do that because they've either been met with a real lack of empathy or really insensitive comments, or, you know, the workplace treating them really terribly, or lack of support. So yeah, I really commend the brave work of women who are coming forward every day and sharing their experience. But yeah, like Rach said, I think the way to the government is through social and financial implications on society, not through a woman crying. Unfortunately, it's not the way to them.
People don't talk about it, but it's happening. Behind closed doors, hidden behind smiling faces. There are so many people suffering in silence right now, unable to access the support that they need and deserve, simply because they don't even know that there is support available. The Pink Elephants community is made up of people from all over Australia. Some come from the big smoke, others from the bush. Some of us have heaps of friends and family around, others have none. Some have lost babies at 5 weeks. Some had ectopic pregnancies. Some had multiple ultrasounds. Others only ever saw the 2 red lines on a positive pregnancy test. But we all have something in common. We have all lost a baby. We are all bereaved parents. There are estimated to be over 100,000 of us across Australia every single year. Please help us connect with these people to give them the support that they deserve. No one should have to lose a baby and be left on their own to navigate their grief. Help Pink Elephants support more bereaved parents. Visit pinkelephants.org.au. We acknowledge that some topics discussed on today's episode may be triggering or distressing. So we have brought on the CEO of Red Nose Australia, Keren Ludski, to share about the support that Red Nose provides to families who need to be supported through later term losses and infant and child deaths. Welcome, Keren.
Hi, Keren. It would be really great if you could share more with our listeners around what Red Nose offers in terms of support for bereaved parents and maybe even family and friends of bereaved parents as well.
So Red Nose offers free bereavement support to anyone impacted by the death of a baby or child, and that's from miscarriage all the way through to the death of an older child. So that covers everything from miscarriage to termination for medical reasons, stillbirth, neonatal death, SIDS, and any other infant or child death that has been sudden and unexpected. We run a range of programs. So what underpins, I guess, everything that we do is a 24/7 bereavement support line that anybody can ring any day, any time, and have that call answered by someone with lived experience who will be able to hold that space for them. And then make sure that they're given access to the next stage of support if they need it. Sometimes parents or family members or friends, I should say, having someone on the other end of the phone when they need it is enough, and it will tide them over till they need it again. Coming out from that peer support line is a really broad range of online and face-to-face groups that again cover all aspects of loss from miscarriage all the way through to older children. Some of those groups are loss specific and some of them are more generally grief related. There's also grandparents groups, there's men's groups, and we know that it is so much more than the immediate parents who are impacted by the death of a baby, and sometimes that extra support is needed for our support people to be able to support their loved ones. We also offer face-to-face, online and phone counselling. So that is a more clinical support avenue that helps people start that integration of grief and helping them, I guess, commence that new life that was very unexpected. We also have our hospital to home program, and that program is a relatively new program. It is delivered by staff who have all had lived experience, and it really focuses on that transition from hospital back into life without that baby. It is a 6-session support model, very much focused on helping that integration. So it's more of a psychosocial support. If families then need more, they are then referred back into the broader support services or to other organisations if that's relevant.
Wow. What an episode. I am so grateful that the girls were so generous in their sharing today. I think I just wanted to acknowledge just the severity of their experiences and really what we have heard today on this episode is a deep sense of trauma that they've both gone through. I think whether it is pregnancy loss, whether it is a stillbirth, whether it is infertility that we're discussing here, we need to start really taking it as seriously as we would with other illnesses, other mental health conditions. There is research that shows women dealing with infertility have depression, anxiety levels just the same as those with cancer, HIV, heart disease. And so when we are holding space for these stories, it's not necessarily that we have to add an added depth or darkness, but I think we just really need to start taking these seriously in the impact that they have in our lives. And hearing that story really just made me want to solidify that. And if you do have anything that's come up from the episode, anything even remotely similar, and you feel like you've been unattended to, you feel like mentally you still haven't got the support you needed, and I really just want to acknowledge and encourage you to take your mental health super seriously when it comes to even just listening to that episode or whatever is going on in your own life.
Yeah, absolutely. Really important. I also want to kind of build on that and acknowledge the resilience that I heard. That is often not something we acknowledge in many of the experiences of women who have journeys of multiple losses or years of fertility challenges, and what it takes to keep picking yourself back up again and going again. And I thought that Jade really put that beautifully when she talked about asking herself whether her desire to have a living child in her arms to parent was more than her fear to go through another pregnancy again. And I feel like those who haven't gone through these journeys, that's just something that you don't understand unless you've lived that. That resilience to put yourself, to be willing to try and conceive again, to possibly be pregnant again, not knowing the outcome and where you're going to land. And I feel like Jade and Rachael exemplify that resilience so much with all of their stories and the way that they kept going. But I also, like I said, want to contextualize that with that need for support while you're doing it, because you can be that resilient and keep going through that. And both of them talk about accessing therapy and support. And then why we brought them on was they talked about how it was a beautiful connection, that they supported each other through different parts of these experiences, and how that connection has helped them to move forward and hold space for each other. And again, that comes back to the heart of Pink Elephants as well, right? That lived experience, that power of peer support, those meaningful connections which come from a place of understanding and empathy rather than trying to fix us and move us forward. Those people that will sit with us in our time of need and darkness. So I hope that what people hear from this as well is not just the resilience and the strength and how hard these experiences really, truly are, but also a little message of hope that it is okay to connect and to reach out to others who can offer you support and hopefully can sit with you while you're going through these experiences.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening. If this episode has brought up a desire to find out more information, some of the research that I've quoted, we'll put in the show notes, and all of the support that you may need. You are not alone. We're here to support you in any possible way we can, and the resources and support links will be in the show notes as always. Thanks so much for listening.
Today's episode may have brought up some feelings for you that you need some support around. That's totally okay. Head to pinkelephants.org.au to find access to our circle of support, your safe space where you can be met with empathy and understanding throughout all of your experiences of early pregnancy loss. We're here for you. You are not alone.
If you enjoyed listening to the Miscarriage Rebellion, please help us by leaving a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. The Miscarriage Rebellion is a Pink Elephants podcast produced by our friends at 3P Studio.